The physical therapy session was supposed to help David Chen walk without pain. Instead, the sound of weights dropping triggered something deeper. Metal hitting concrete, that dull thud that still woke him screaming 15 years later. The therapist asked what was wrong, but how do you explain that a simple noise can transport you back to the moment your legs stopped working and your loader died in your arms? Welcome to our channel where we share the untold stories of America's warriors. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. You're about to hear from a tank commander whose life changed in one devastating second in Afghanistan. Before we continue, write in the comments how old you are and what city you're from. These stories connect us all, and your voice matters in honoring our veterans. Staff Sergeant David Chen had commanded M1 Abrams tanks for 6 years when his unit deployed to Afghanistan in 2008. At 28, he was old enough to understand war's realities, but young enough to believe his crew was invincible. Tank commanders developed that confidence. 68 tons of armor, depleted uranium shells, thermal imaging that could spot enemies 2 miles away. In an Abrams, you felt like a god of war. His crew had been together for 18 months. Private Rodriguez, the driver, fastest hands Chen had ever seen on tank controls. Sergeant Murphy, the gunner, could thread a needle at 1,000 yards. And Private Jackson, the loader, 19 years old, engaged to his high school girlfriend, planning to use his Army college benefits to become a teacher. They called their tank Iron Prayer because Jackson painted a small cross on every round before loading it. Kid was religious, sent half his paycheck home to help his mother pay rent. The kind of soldier who made commanders proud and kept everyone grounded. The morning of March 15, 2009, started like any other patrol. Intelligence reported Taliban activity along Highway 1 between Kandahar and Shah Wali Kot. Standard reconnaissance mission, show force, gather intelligence, return to base. Nothing their crew hadn't done dozens of times before. But Chen felt something different that morning, an uneasiness that came from too many patrols in hostile territory. The silence was wrong. No children playing in the streets, no vendors selling tea to passing convoys. Even the dogs had disappeared. "Driver, slow it down," Chen commanded through the intercom. "Something's not right." Rodriguez reduced speed from 30 to 20 miles per hour. The Abrams engine noise changed pitch, a deep rumble that could be heard for miles. In tank warfare, stealth was impossible. You announced your presence and relied on firepower and armor to survive whatever came next. Chen scanned the roadside through his commander's periscope. Mud brick compounds, abandoned market stalls, empty fields where farmers should have been working. In 6 months of deployment, he'd learned to read Afghanistan's rhythms. This wasn't normal. "Gunner, sweep left sector," Chen ordered. "I'm not liking what I'm seeing." Murphy rotated the turret, thermal imaging searching for heat signatures that might indicate hidden enemies. "Negative contact, Sergeant, but you're right. This place feels dead." That's when Chen made the decision that would haunt him forever. Logic said continue the patrol. Orders said complete the mission. But experience said something was wrong. "All stations, halt," Chen commanded. The tank stopped in the middle of Highway 1, engine idling. 68 tons of American military might sitting motionless, while Chen tried to decide whether his paranoia was justified or if he was just another nervous commander seeing ghosts in empty buildings. Jackson's voice crackled through the intercom. "Sergeant, my girlfriend sent pictures of her dress. Want to see what I'm marrying when we get home?" Chen smiled despite his nervousness. Jackson talked about his girlfriend constantly. Rebecca, a nursing student in Ohio who wrote letters every day and sent care packages filled with homemade cookies. The kid was planning to propose when they returned from deployment. "Save it for chow time, Jackson. Right now, I need you watching." The explosion hit before Chen could finish the sentence. IED, improvised explosive device, buried in the road, probably triggered by cell phone from one of those empty buildings. The blast lifted the front of the 68-ton tank like a toy, spinning it 30 degrees before slamming it back to earth. Chen's head snapped forward into the commander's display, splitting his forehead open. Blood immediately obscured his vision. The tank's interior became a chaos of sparks, smoke, and screaming metal as systems failed and ammunition cooked off. Then silence, the kind of profound quiet that follows catastrophic violence. Chen tried to move his legs. Nothing. Tried again. Still nothing. The explosion had compressed 3 vertebrae in his lower spine, severing the neural pathways that controlled everything below his waist. But the worst part wasn't his paralysis. The worst part was Jackson. The 19-year-old loader was slumped against Chen's legs, blood pooling beneath his body armor. Shrapnel from the explosion had penetrated the tank's armor at precisely the wrong angle, hitting Jackson in the neck. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. Chen reached down with hands that still worked, checking for a pulse he knew wouldn't be there. Jackson's engagement ring, a simple gold band he'd bought with his first deployment bonus, was still on his finger. The letter from Rebecca was still in his breast pocket, announcing her acceptance to nursing school. "Jackson," Chen whispered, though he knew it was pointless. "Come on, kid, stay with me." But Jackson was already gone, died instantly in the blast that had stolen Chen's legs. The loader who painted crosses on artillery shells and planned to teach elementary school would never see his 21st birthday. Rodriguez was unconscious but breathing. Murphy was screaming about his arm, probably broken, but not life-threatening. Chen was trapped in the commander's position with a dead soldier in his lap and no feeling below his waist. Hit that like button if this story got you hooked, because what happened next would test everything Chen thought he knew about survival. The rescue took 6 hours. 6 hours of Chen holding Jackson's body while Rodriguez drifted in and out of consciousness, and Murphy's broken arm swelled to twice its normal size. 6 hours of calling for medevac while Taliban fighters took pot shots at their disabled tank from the same buildings Chen had suspected were occupied. Apache helicopters provided cover, their chain guns ripping apart mud brick walls where muzzle flashes appeared. But the enemy fire kept medical helicopters from landing. Chen and his crew were trapped in a metal coffin that had become a magnet for every insurgent within 20 miles. "Dragon 6, this is Iron Prayer," Chen radioed to their command post. "We need immediate extraction. 1 KIA, 3 wounded, tank disabled." "Iron Prayer, Dragon 6. Medical is inbound but taking heavy fire. Can you return fire from your position?" Chen tried to reach the commander's machine gun mounted above his hatch, but his paralyzed legs wouldn't support his weight. Murphy's broken arm made operating the main gun impossible. Rodriguez was still unconscious. "Negative, Dragon 6. Crew is combat ineffective." For a tank commander, those words represented the ultimate failure. Chen had been trained to fight his way out of any situation, to use firepower and mobility to overcome obstacles. But with Jackson dead and his own legs useless, Iron Prayer had become a 68-ton target. The Taliban knew it too. They concentrated fire on the tank's weakest points: vision blocks, external equipment, anything that might force the crew to abandon their armor. Chen could hear rounds pinging off the turret, each impact a reminder that he was responsible for getting his men home alive. Jackson's blood was starting to congeal on Chen's uniform. The kid's face had gone pale, his skin cold to the touch. Chen found himself talking to the corpse, maintaining the kind of conversation they'd had dozens of times during boring patrols. "Your girl's going to be a great nurse, Jackson. She's got the hands for it, right? Gentle hands. You told me that story about how she bandaged your knee when you fell off your bike. Remember that?" Murphy looked at his commander with growing concern. "Sergeant, you need to stop talking to him. Jackson's gone." But Chen couldn't stop. Talking to Jackson was the only thing keeping him sane while enemy bullets searched for gaps in their armor. The alternative was accepting that his decision to halt the patrol had killed the best soldier in his crew. The breakthrough came when an Air Force A-10 Warthog arrived on station. The pilot, call sign Hawkeye, had been monitoring their radio traffic and understood the situation. "Iron Prayer, Hawkeye. I'm going to make some noise to suppress enemy fire. When I do, your medevac will have 30 seconds to get in and out. You boys ready for extraction?" Chen looked down at Jackson's body. Army protocol required leaving no man behind, but evacuation procedures prioritized the living. Jackson would have to wait for a recovery team to retrieve his remains. "Rodriguez is coming around," Murphy reported, "but he's pretty banged up." The driver was conscious but disoriented, asking repeatedly about the explosion and whether everyone was okay. Chen didn't have the heart to tell him about Jackson. Not yet. "Iron Prayer, Hawkeye. Guns hot, danger close. Keep your heads down." The A-10's GAU-8 cannon sounded like the world ending. 30mm shells shredded buildings, roads, anything that might conceal enemy fighters. The psychological effect was devastating. Taliban fighters who'd been bold enough to attack a disabled tank suddenly found themselves on the receiving end of close air support. What would you do in our hero's place? The medevac helicopter landed in a cloud of dust and debris, combat medics rushing toward the disabled tank with stretchers and medical equipment. But Chen faced an impossible choice. Let them take Jackson's body first, or prioritize the living crew members who might still be saved. "Take Rodriguez first," Chen ordered the medics. "Then Murphy. I'm staying with my loader." "Sir, you need immediate medical attention," the lead medic argued, looking at Chen's head wound and obvious paralysis. "You're going into shock." "I said I'm staying with Jackson." But the medics weren't taking no for an answer. Chen's injuries were life-threatening, and their job was saving lives regardless of what the patient wanted. They loaded him onto a stretcher despite his protests, separating him from Jackson for the first time in 6 hours. "Don't leave him," Chen pleaded as they carried him toward the helicopter. "Please don't leave him alone." But military necessity demanded tough choices. The living came first. Jackson's body would be recovered later, when the area was secure and a recovery team could safely extract the fallen soldier. Chen's last memory before the morphine took effect was looking back at Iron Prayer through the helicopter's window. His tank, his responsibility, his home for 18 months, sitting disabled in the Afghan desert with Jackson's body still inside. The flight to the trauma hospital at Bagram Air Base took 40 minutes. Chen drifted in and out of consciousness, haunted by the sound that had started everything. That dull thud of the IED detonating beneath 68 tons of armor. 3 surgeries couldn't repair his spinal cord. The damage was too extensive, the severed nerves beyond current medical technology. Chen would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair, but he was alive. Jackson wasn't. The notification team visited Jackson's family in Ohio 3 days later. His mother collapsed when they told her. His girlfriend Rebecca refused to believe it until she saw the flag-draped coffin arriving at Dover Air Force Base. Chen watched the funeral on a laptop computer from his hospital bed at Walter Reed. The ceremony was beautiful. Honor guard, 21-gun salute, taps played by a bugler who didn't miss a note. Jackson would have been proud. But Chen noticed something that would haunt him for years: the empty folding chair next to Rebecca, the one where Jackson should have been sitting, watching his own funeral, cracking jokes about the serious faces of the honor guard. Recovery was brutal. Physical therapy to build upper body strength, occupational therapy to learn basic tasks from a wheelchair, psychological counseling to deal with survivors' guilt and PTSD. But the hardest part was the silence. No more tank engine rumbling beneath him. No more crew chatter on the intercom. No more Jackson talking about his girlfriend's letters or showing pictures of her in her nursing school uniform. Just the dull thud that echoed in Chen's mind every time something hit the floor. 15 years later, Chen was attending a physical therapy session at the VA hospital in Denver when the therapist dropped a 5-pound weight. The sound of metal hitting concrete transported him instantly back to that road between Kandahar and Shawalikot. Dull thud, just like the IED. Chen's hands started shaking. His breathing became rapid, shallow. The physical therapy room transformed into the interior of Iron Prayer, complete with the smell of diesel fuel and blood. "Mr. Chen?" The therapist, a young woman named Sarah, knelt beside his wheelchair. "Are you okay?" Chen couldn't answer. In his mind, Jackson was dying again. Rodriguez was unconscious again. Murphy was screaming again. And Chen was trapped in a metal coffin, responsible for men he couldn't save. "I need to leave," Chen whispered. Should I call someone? Your wife, the crisis counselor? Chen's wife had left him 3 years after his return from Afghanistan. She tried to understand, tried to be supportive, but living with someone who woke up screaming most nights and flinched at loud noises eventually wore her down. The divorce was amicable. She still sent Christmas cards and birthday wishes, but the loneliness was devastating. No, I just need air. Chen wheeled himself outside to the hospital's memorial garden, where plaques honored local veterans who died in various conflicts. He'd been coming here for therapy twice a week for 2 years, but today was the first time he'd really looked at the memorial wall. Name after name: Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, Korea. Young men and women who died far from home, serving a country that often forgot about them after the flag-draped coffins disappeared from news coverage. Chen found himself looking for Jackson's name, even though he knew it wouldn't be there. This memorial was for local veterans. Jackson was buried in Ohio, far from the Colorado mountains where Chen had tried to rebuild his life. That's when he saw the man watching him from across the garden. Tall, graying hair, walking with the careful gait of someone whose legs had been rebuilt by military surgeons, the man approached slowly, giving Chen time to recognize him. Rodriguez, Chen couldn't believe it. Miguel Rodriguez? His former driver looked older, more worn, but the smile was exactly the same. Hello, Sergeant. Mind if I sit? Rodriguez settled onto the bench next to Chen's wheelchair. For several minutes, neither man spoke. Two survivors of Iron Prayer, meeting accidentally at a VA hospital 15 years after the explosion that had changed their lives forever. I heard you were in Denver, Rodriguez finally said. Murphy told me. We stay in touch sometimes. How is he? Good. Married, 2 kids. Works construction in Phoenix. His arm healed up fine, but he still has nightmares about the sound. Chen knew exactly what sound Rodriguez meant, the dull thud that preceded everything going wrong. I think about Jackson every day, Rodriguez continued, about how he was showing me pictures of Rebecca right before, you know. She became a nurse, Chen said. Rebecca. I looked her up a few years ago. Pediatric ICU in Cleveland. Married a doctor. Has 2 kids of her own. That's good. Jackson would have liked that. They sat in comfortable silence. 2 broken men who'd shared the worst day of their lives. Around them, the memorial garden provided a peaceful setting for conversations about things civilians couldn't understand. You blame yourself, Rodriguez said. It wasn't a question. I stopped the tank. If we'd kept moving, maybe the IED would have missed us. Maybe Jackson would be alive. Rodriguez shook his head. You stopped because something felt wrong. Good commanders trust their instincts. What happened wasn't your fault. But Chen had spent 15 years replaying that moment, analyzing every decision, wondering if different choices could have saved Jackson's life. The weight of command was supposed to end when you left the service, but some responsibilities followed you forever. I can't get past the sound, Chen admitted. That thud when the IED went off. I hear it everywhere. Doors closing, books dropping, weights hitting the floor. Every time I'm back in that tank with Jackson dying in my lap. Rodriguez understood. Every veteran carried their own version of the sound. Mortars, gunfire, helicopters, IEDs. Audio triggers that could transform a safe civilian environment into a combat zone in milliseconds. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next, because what Rodriguez said would change Chen's perspective forever. You know what I remember most about that day? Rodriguez asked. Not the explosion, not the pain. I remember your voice on the intercom, keeping us calm for 6 hours while we waited for extraction. I remember you talking to Jackson, treating him with dignity even after he was gone. I remember you refusing medical treatment until you knew the rest of us were safe. Chen had never thought about those details. His memories focused on failure, the decision to stop, the inability to save Jackson, the helplessness of being trapped in a disabled tank. You were a good commander, Sergeant. The best I ever served under. Jackson knew that. We all knew that. Do you agree with the hero's actions? Chen was about to discover that heroism sometimes meant accepting that you'd done everything possible, even when the outcome was tragic. "There's something else," Rodriguez said, pulling out his phone. "Something Jackson's mother wanted you to have." The video was shaky, obviously recorded on an older phone. It showed Jackson in his barracks room back at Fort Carson, talking to someone off camera. "Tell Sergeant Chen he's the best tank commander in the Army," Jackson's voice said. "Tell him if anything happens to me over there, it won't be because he didn't take care of his crew. Tell him I trust him with my life." Chen stared at the phone screen, watching a dead soldier defend decisions his commander still questioned 15 years later. "His mother found this on his computer," Rodriguez explained. "He recorded it right before we deployed in case something happened. She wanted you to see it." The video continued with Jackson talking about Rebecca, about his plans for after the Army, about how proud he was to serve in Chen's crew. A 19-year-old soldier who'd understood the risks and accepted them willingly. "He didn't blame you," Rodriguez said softly. "None of us did." That evening, Chen returned to his apartment and did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He opened the box of military memorabilia he'd packed away after his discharge, photos from Afghanistan, letters from his crew, the Bronze Star he'd received for keeping his men alive during those 6 hours under fire. At the bottom of the box was Jackson's engagement ring, returned to Chen after the funeral along with other personal effects. Rebecca had asked Chen to keep it, saying Jackson would have wanted his commander to have something to remember him by. Chen held the simple gold band up to the light, thinking about the young soldier who'd planned to propose after returning from deployment. Jackson had talked about the ring constantly, how he'd saved for months to buy it, how nervous he was about asking Rebecca's father for permission, how he'd already picked out names for their future children. For the first time since the explosion, Chen allowed himself to remember Jackson as he'd lived rather than how he died. The kid who painted crosses on artillery shells, who sent half his paycheck home to help his mother, who trusted his commander completely, even knowing that trust might cost him everything. Chen's phone buzzed with a text from Rodriguez. "Therapy session tomorrow. Want to go together? Murphy's flying in from Phoenix. Crew reunion." Chen smiled, typing back, "Iron prayer rides again." That night, for the first time in 15 years, Chen slept through the night without waking to the sound of that dull thud. Not because the memories had faded, but because he'd finally understood that some sounds were worth carrying. Not as punishment for surviving, but as proof that the bonds forged in combat could outlast even death itself. Jackson's ring sat on Chen's nightstand, catching moonlight from the window, a reminder that some promises transcend the battlefield and some crews stay together forever.